Amazon Prime series Young Sherlock has been out for a week now, and this is the only review you need to know if it is worth watching. Hi, I'm Dear Stalker Darling, and this is a study in stories, and these are my credentials. If you haven't figured it out yet, I am a huge fan of Sherlock Holmes. Nay, not just a fan. I refer to that man as the literary love of my life. I refer to Sherlock Holmes as my husband. And I did it as a joke, but then it actually built an association in my brain so that, like, if I'm in a bookstore and I'm walking past something and I don't entirely, look and I just see, Sherlock Holmes out of the corner of my eye, my brain goes, hey, your husband just walked by. And I'm always like, what? But I have read and I have watched and I have listened to everything Sherlock Holmes, anything you can possibly get your hands on. I've read, behind me you can see we've got the original stories. I've got all of the pastiches. A pastiche is essentially published fan fiction. The popular ones like the Mary Russell series, which I love more than life itself, to the obscure anthologies that you can't really find anywhere. We've got the amazing Lindsay Fay, who is the best Sherlock Holmes pastiche writer known to man. A lot of people know the ones by Anthony Horowitz. And when it comes to watching, I've seen it all. I've seen everything from obviously BBC Sherlock, the number one, will never be surpassed, best Sherlock Holmes ever, Jeremy Brett from the 1980s Granada television series. Basil Rathbone and Nigel Bruce, I've watched all the films, and I've listened to all their radio shows. That used to be like my go-to listening at the gym on the treadmill. I've even seen the 1912 film starring William Gillette. He actually also wrote the film, and it was a film based on the stage play that he wrote. And it was lost for 100 years, but they happened to find a copy of it in a French archive and were able to save and scrub most of it so that I could watch it through my college library. I've read the good, the bad, and the ugly when it comes to Sherlock Holmes. And I mean, I have read some bad stuff. I have read some ugly stuff. And I've read phenomenal things, and I've watched phenomenal things. I tell you all of this because, one, these are my qualifications. I've seen it all. I know it all. This is why I am the best person to review Young Sherlock for you. But I also tell you this because this is why I love Sherlock Holmes. And this one author, Zach Dundas, in The Great Detective, it's like a nonfiction kind of study of Sherlock Holmes. He says that Sherlock Holmes is something better than real. And that phrase has stuck with me for so long because it's so true. He's not a real person, obviously, but he feels like one. He's always been so much more than his stories, and so much more than his original stories with Doyle. You know, he's grown into all these other stories. And the thing about Holmes is that he's so perfectly himself, right? You know, with the deer stalker, with the meerschaum pipe, with, his powers of deduction. He's so himself, and yet you can take him and put him into so many different scenarios. You can change him, you can change who he is, what he is, and you're still like, yeah, that's Sherlock Holmes. You can put him in a spaceship on the moon, which, yes, is a story I've actually read. You can put him in Dunkirk, again, a story I've actually read. You can put him in World War II, World War I. You can make him a spy. You can put him in India. You can, make him a woman. You can put him in modern TV shows. You can give him, you can marry him off. You can give him wives. You can give him daughters. You can give him sisters. And yes, actually, a lot of people will get into this, but yes, Doyle himself even said, you may marry him or murder him or do whatever you like with him, which goes back to the 1912 film. If you'd like to hear that whole story of how the film and the play and Doyle and that quote came to be, that's going to be my footnote at the end of this film. We're now doing footnotes. I'm very excited about it. But even in the original stories, Holmes is so himself and yet so dynamic. A lot of people will read the original stories and be like, this is clearly, a gay man, he and Watson, what goes on behind the scenes at Baker Street. Some people read him as asexual. Some people read him as just being afraid of women, with his whole thing with Irene Adler and the woman. I've seen arguments that you could read Holmes as a trans man or just a woman disguising herself as a man in Victorian times so that she can have this career. And it all makes sense and it all works. He is somehow so identifiable and yet so flexible and malleable, and he can fit into all these different forms and and identities and shapes. Even the stories that I would call the bad and the ugly they still are Holmes. I can't deny it. They are still Holmes. I don't like them for personal reasons. I don't like them because the writing's bad, but it's still Sherlock Holmes. They still get him. They still, you can make him as flat as you want. You can give him as much character depth as you want, and it's still Sherlock Holmes. And so I have seen every possible, and I don't even want to say that because there are still possibilities for different ways we can write and read and take home so many different directions, and I want to see them all. I'm excited to see them all. But you will find a lot of Sherlockian scholars who hate this. They hate everything that is not absolute canon, meaning it comes from the Sir Arthur Conan Doyle stories. Some scholars also just like, they'll appreciate a good pastiche, but only if it is written exactly as Doyle would have done it, which I would send you to Lindsay Fay if you want that. She's phenomenal. It's insane. She's so good. But I am a Sherlock scholar who believes that Holmes is more than his stories. He is so much more than his original stories. He is something better than real. He is so much more than just these stories, and so it is ridiculous to try and confine him to just those original stories. As I said, I'm open to it all. I love it all. Which is, again, why I am the only review you need. Because here I am with my background and my knowledge, and I'm sitting here without a deep bias other than my biased love for Sherlock Holmes. I am here just for the love of it, for the love of his character, for the love of the game, and for the love of story and all the different ways we can talk about this one character and this one story of a man brilliant than his peers who just wants to use that power to solve crimes. So let's talk about young Sherlock. I admit I went in with a bias, and I'll admit to you I am only on episode 3. I am not a binger. I like to take my time with shows. We've lost the art of like savoring things these days. So I am very much someone I want to savor every minute of the show. Actually, I've watched 3 episodes and then today I just rewatched the first 2. But even though I'm only that far, even if the series makes a 180 from where it is now, it's not going to affect my review. I can guarantee it. It's not going to, not. Those first 3 episodes have been enough for me to know that this show is flawless. It is phenomenal. I can't remember the last time I have loved something this just, it's so good. I admit I went in with a bias. I went in with a great deal of hesitation because it's directed by Guy Ritchie. And Guy Ritchie, of course, originally directed the Sherlock Holmes films with Robert Downey Jr. And those weren't my favorite. They were still very Holmesian, and I liked that they showed the like grittier side of Holmes. You know, he's a boxer. Like he throws punches. He's not afraid to get his hands dirty. But those were very much action movies rather than like detective movies. And they relied heavily on their atmosphere of steampunk rather than, authentic Victorian London, which is fine. Again, it's just another setting, another place, another story. Holmes fits right in. He always does. But it was just a little too, they were very much Hollywood-centered movies for me. And I like my Holmes, just personally, I like my Holmes to feel like a cozy fireplace on like a cold, foggy day in London, with like a big cup of tea. That's the kind of Holmes I like. Even if it's set on the moon, in space, whatever, you can give me a Sherlock Holmes that feels like I should be drinking a cup of tea with it. And that's young Sherlock. But it's also, it is without a doubt the funniest Sherlock Holmes I've ever seen. For those of you who haven't seen Young Sherlock, I'm realizing I should probably take a quick 2 seconds to explain to you the plot. So the plot follows, you guessed it, young Sherlock Holmes, before he is the master detective living at 221B Baker Street. This instead follows him at Oxford, and not in the way you think. I don't want to spoil it because it's a hilarious plot twist. Literally, I was cackling. Hilarious plot twist. But he's at Oxford, and he meets Mr. James Moriarty, who is also a student at Oxford. And the two of them kind of pair up to start working together to solve some of the things going on at Oxford and in and around. Brother Mycroft is involved. They go into like the Holmes family lore a bit. And one mystery, they've done a phenomenal job pacing this show. You know, like TV shows, like sometimes you're like, this could have been a movie, could have been condensed. No, every single episode so far, it's like, this has its own mystery, it's sealed, it's set, but it's also dragging you into the next one and makes you want to keep going. It's so well done. My favorite part about the series is the duo between Holmes and Moriarty. Now, of course, in the traditional series, they become enemies and villains, and it's, the great Professor Moriarty who he grapples with on the Reichenbach Falls, and they both supposedly fall to their death. But here, they're literally just like two dudes who are really smart, but also really stupid, and it's hilarious. Like, I read a review, and this is what prompted me to come make this. I read a review that was like, well, the series doesn't really set up Holmes and Moriarty to be their stories later, like with the, them being mortal enemies and this, that, and it doesn't need to, is my point. This is the thesis of this video. It doesn't need to. This series doesn't need to do anything other than be itself and provide entertainment and joy. I mean, it doesn't even have to do that. But my point is that all of these Holmes stories, they don't have to connect to each other. They don't have to connect to the original series. Even the original series doesn't connect to itself half the time. That's the whole thing with Doyle. This is why everyone became so obsessed with him and why they thought it was real, because he was so inconsistent. He ended up giving Watson like 3 wives. All the dates were messed up and everyone was like, ooh, he did that to like conceal the real dates and real names of the people involved. No, it's because he's just dumb and he's not dumb. I will give Doyle credit. But he did not care about his Sherlock Holmes stories, and he was just like, I'm going to make stuff up. I'm just going to, you know what? Let's have some science fiction involved here. Let's talk about some monkeys over here. Let's have a crazy demon hound over here. Like, But Young Sherlock is phenomenal as its own thing. And that's my favorite Sherlock Holmes stories, are the ones that stand alone. With the Mary Russell series, you don't need to know anything else to enjoy them. With Enola Holmes, you don't need to know anything else to enjoy them. You just walk right in and you're just like, oh, okay, that's Sherlock Holmes. Oh, and these people are related. All right, detective story time. I know what's coming. Let's go. And it's just my favorite thing I've ever seen right now. It's the bromance between, and I'm kind of hoping it turns into an actual romance, but I haven't gotten there yet. So we'll see. But Moriarty and Holmes play off each other. The acting is unbelievably phenomenal. The way they banter back and forth is, I want to say unprecedented, because it's just so top tier of this banter. Like, I love them far more than I've ever loved any Holmes and Watson duo ever. And so they're like playing off their genius, and they're investigating. But as I said, they're also just 20-something-year-old idiots. So for example, at one point they're trying to escape somewhere, and there's a lot of like interesting bits and bobs around the room. And these 2 guys are blocking their door, and you're like, ooh, what are they going to do? Are they going to, concoct something to like, or are they going to, throw something, get out the window that way and do like cool karate? No. Moriarty just throws the oil lamp at them and sets one of the guys on fire. And I want to throw in here too, the vibes you get from the two of them, just the whole thing is very Oscar Wilde, like very like flamboyant, which is why I'm like hoping it turns into a romance. But I want to throw that out there because Holmes has always given Oscar Wilde vibes. He should always give Oscar Wilde vibes if you're doing him right? So yes, that means a little bit gay, but it also just means like extravagant and fun. He's a very, like, a lot of people try to make him out to be a not emotional person, but he really is. In the original stories, he's laughing and he's joking. Like he's moving with his whole body. He's a quiet, deep thinker, but he's also just like seizes the day when it's there and takes such joy from it. And this series like rolls with that. They take that and they just do such a great job. I was going to make this a full footnote in the end, but we're going to make this a tiny aside right here. The connection between Oscar Wilde and Sherlock Holmes goes all the way back to the original stories, just as a fun fact. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle wrote the first Sherlock Holmes novel, which if you read, Study in Scarlet, is not good. And it really doesn't highlight Holmes, and you're just kind of like, he's just kind of like this potato detective guy. Okay, whatever. And then half the story is set in America, and it's a whole thing. But then he writes a second one, The Sign of Four, phenomenally better. And he was commissioned to write that story at a special dinner with this magazine, editor guy, whatever. But the other guy who happened to be at that dinner, who also was commissioned to write a story for this magazine, was none other than Oscar Wilde. So if you want to tell me that the second time Sherlock Holmes was ever written, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle was thinking about the time he met Oscar Wilde and that didn't infiltrate into Holmes's character, you're going to lose the argument. Another brilliant thing, again, I just go watch the series. It's phenomenal. It's brilliant. You don't need to hear more, but I'm going to keep going because I need to talk about how brilliant the deduction scenes are. In BBC Sherlock, they're like the mind palace, and you see all these flitting things, and he's going through the, whatever as he's thinking. It's weird the way, you have to get weird to show how Sherlock Holmes thinks. There's a lot of zooming in on details, freeze framing in the Robert Downey Jr. films. For this one, it's like he enters a space in his mind, but it's of a space he's been. So you're kind of rewinding the film. But he and Moriarty are sharing this space and analyzing the scene together. And the world is lucky I am no longer in academia, because the giant dissertation I would write on the two of them sharing this mind space and the intimacy of it would just never end. I did see some other criticism, commentary, whatever, about this series and how some people feel about Sherlock Holmes's family and backstory being involved, but I gotta tell you, that's always involved. If you're gonna do young Sherlock at all, they're gonna try to give him a tragic backstory. I could point to, good Lord, at least 6 books on this shelf that are all about Sherlock Holmes having a traumatic childhood, and a lot of them add a sibling or a sister. I mean, obviously Enola Holmes. And some of them don't have a traumatic childhood. Enola Holmes seems to be rather joyous. I'll also add here that the Amazon Prime series says it's based on the book series by Andrew Lane, but it absolutely does not. I don't know if they just had to say that for copyright, or it originally started out as that and then it grew and progressed into this thing that's way better. But there is no way this series is based on these books, because these books are nuts. Okay? The first one, the villain is, are you ready for this? A quadriplegic, right? So no movement below the neck, whose minions string him up like a marionette puppet and swing him around so that he's still the world's best fencing champion or something. What? But even with the tragic backstory and whatever in Holmes's background, there's still just so much joy. This series is infectious. I can't stop laughing. It is so joyful and funny. And maybe everyone will disagree with me, and it really is just my own particular brand of Sherlock Holmes joy and humor. And that's fine. But I'm telling you that if they made this series for one person, that person is me. And they get 100 out of 100 from me. And actually, I did hear that it debuted as 100% fresh on Rotten Tomatoes. So maybe it isn't just me. Perhaps I shall make another video when I finish the series. Perhaps not. When will I finish the series? I don't know. I've got a lot of big, scary things coming up at work. But for right now, I just wanted to say that the series is phenomenal. It's phenomenal. I've literally no problems with the series whatsoever. I usually, you know me, I usually have this little problem. Oh, I wish they did this. Oh, no, nothing. I have no problems. I love it. When I get to the end, I'm fully expecting, I told you, I've already rewatched the first 2 episodes. I'm kind of picturing myself when I get to the end, I'm just going to start it over again and go through it again. And it's everything down to the tiniest set design detail. It's phenomenal, and I'm just so grateful that the show exists. It's been so long since there's been new Sherlock Holmes and good Sherlock Holmes. It's been, we've had Enola Holmes, and she's great. She's got another film coming out this year I'm excited about. But Sherlock Holmes is my husband. Okay? And I've missed him. And now my husband is home. Holmes. Home? Home. You get it. Well, let me know if you have watched the series, if you want to watch the series now, and if you enjoy it, or if you're wrong. Welcome to our first footnote. I'm very excited about this. Here's the story of Conan Doyle and fan fiction and why Sherlock Holmes can be married off without a problem. Sir Arthur Conan Doyle hates Sherlock Holmes. You might have heard this, maybe not, but he hates him. One of the reasons he hates him is that Sherlock Holmes is more famous than he is. Everybody asks him about Mr. Holmes. Nobody's asking, it's always, how's Holmes? Where's the next Sherlock Holmes stories? And never, how are you, Sir Arthur Conan Doyle? How are you, Arthur? How's life? Could we have your autograph? No. And this is like the first time this has happened. Charles Dickens was a huge celebrity, but he was the celebrity. Nobody was asking, where Oliver Twist was or where Barnaby Rudge or whoever, where's Scrooge? I want Scrooge's auto. No, this is the first time this has happened. And so Doyle's really kind of ticked off at that. And so he just kills him off. He's like, I'm done. He also said like the detective stories were getting more and more difficult to write, doing deductions, working your way backwards through the logic. He had other more important things he wanted to write. He wrote some big historical books about different wars of the empire and sea voyages and stuff nobody really cares to remember, which is why he's probably rolling around in his grave at light speed right now. And so he kills him off. He kills off Sherlock Holmes in the final problem. There's Professor Moriarty. Hilariously, this is the first time we're hearing about this big bad professor, but now we are all just hating Professor Moriarty because he and Sherlock Holmes fell off a cliff together. Because despite being the two greatest minds the world's ever known, they just decide to end their lives and their fight in a, bar-style brawl on the side of a cliff. As men do. But while he has Sherlock Holmes dead and everybody is sad, Doyle starts to notice that other people are writing Sherlock Holmes stories. He gets some sent to him. One of them actually was found in his papers and stuff, and they thought it was a lost Sherlock Holmes story, but it was actually written by another author who sent it to Doyle to be like, what do you think of this one? Could you want to publish it? Can we share it? And they accidentally published it under Sir Arthur Conan Doyle's name for a decade and a half before it got correctly reattributed. And he was especially noticing people putting Sherlock Holmes on the stage. You get these kind of those theaters you see in Sherlock Holmes stories where they're just these, back alley theaters. You pay a couple farthings or whatever and you go in and enjoy some beer and have a show. And the shows were based on Sherlock Holmes. And there were parodies, right? So a parody is like fan fiction, but with the intent to make fun of whatever it is you are parodying. And naturally, Doyle being Doyle, he doesn't say, hey, stop using my creation and, making fun of it. Instead, he goes, how much money are you making off of this and how much money should I actually be making off of it since it was my creation? So Conan Doyle writes a play and he sends it off to Mr. William Gillette, who is an American actor. He is the George Clooney of his day. Everyone knows him. Everybody, he is the guy. And he's also a playwright as well as an actor. And he receives Doyle's play, and then it mysteriously gets lost in a fire. Oh no. Did it really, or was it just that bad? But then Gillette says, don't worry, Doyle. I will write you a whole new play. You'll still get your money credits, because it's, from your creation. I'll still send you, your copyright, your cut. But can I write it my way? Can I write my own story? And also, is it okay if I marry Sherlock Holmes off at the end of my play? People like that. And Doyle writes him back this letter that says, you may marry him or murder him or do whatever you like with him. Essentially, I don't care. I hate that guy. Just get me my money. So Gillette writes this story, and it gets filmed as this film in 1912, which hilariously, Gillette is oh my God, I think he must have been in his 70s when it was filmed. He was still playing Holmes well into his 80s. And the film is supposed to be Holmes as a young man. Because he marries this girl at the end who's barely 20, if that. And I don't even remember the gist of the story. I think Professor Moriarty's involved. I'm pretty sure he's involved. But it's, very slapstick, a lot of vaudeville style theater. But it was a huge hit. It toured the United States multiple times. Gillette starred in it multiple times. And if you want to know again, my credentials of how insane I am. I went to William Gillette's house. It's in Connecticut. It's a castle. It's amazing. And they actually have an original copy of that letter from Doyle, which is awesome. And his house is really awesome. I really recommend it. He was a quirky, fun guy. So Doyle gets his money. He's raking in the dough. And he goes on vacation to Devon once. And he's like, hey, actually, this would be a good place to set a story. Writes The Hound of the Baskervilles. But Holmes isn't resurrected yet. And then it is once again an American who reaches out to Doyle and is like, hey, bring Sherlock Holmes back from the dead and we'll give you this much money. And Doyle was like, I don't want to do that. So I'm going to ask for an outrageous sum of money and they'll all leave me alone forever. So he names his sum of like what it would take to bring Sherlock Holmes back from the dead. And the magazine goes, done. So he's like, oh, now I got to write all these stories again. Which is how we got, honestly, the majority of the Sherlock Holmes ones. I'd say the best Sherlock Holmes stories, like the cream of the crop, are mostly written in that first round. But the majority of them were written in the second round. Well, if you made it to the end of our footnotes, I hope you enjoyed. And if you would like more Sherlock Holmes stories and reviews, please just ask. I very happily will talk about this all the time and forever. And essentially, once the floodgates open, they can't stop. So ask me anything, anytime. And thanks for watching.